My mother-in-law passed away recently. After her funeral, my husband, James, and I cleaned up her bedroom and all her belongings. Right after getting married to James, I started caring for my mother-in-law. She was a good-hearted woman, but it was certainly tough. I thought I could finally relax now that the huge burden had been lifted from my shoulders. However, I was having mixed feelings. I was glad that the frantic days were finally over, but at the same time, I was feeling an overwhelming sense of grief. One day, out of the blue, James said to me, "You're cheating on me, aren't you?" What? I have no idea where you got that idea from, but I have never had an affair. I had been taking care of my mother-in-law at home for the last 10 years. Unlike James, who was always finding excuses to stay away from home, I never had time for such things. Well, I got along with my mother-in-law even better than with my own mother, so it wasn't too bad after all. James didn't believe a word I said. "You're lying to me. I saw you last night, walking with a young man near the train station. Quite a lanky guy, wasn't he?" "Oh, now I remembered. Oh, that guy." Before I could even answer, he triumphantly said, "See, I knew it. You are such a horrible woman, I want a divorce. As soon as my mom passed away, you just go out and find a man." He made up his mind that I was cheating on him and wouldn't listen to what I had to say. I had so much I wanted to say to him, that I know it was actually him having an affair, or that I had no time for things like that, but all I could do was to give him a dry laugh, haha. "What's wrong with you? What's so funny? Are you crazy?" James freaked out. "Don't tell me you don't want a divorce. We clearly don't love each other anymore. You've never made any effort to keep me around. You don't even bother with makeup or dressing decently." I interrupted him, saying, "Okay." It was ridiculous for him to complain about me when he was the one at fault. I was angry at him and didn't want to listen to him. "What?" He blinked with surprise. I said, "Okay. Let's get divorced." It was true that I hadn't worn makeup or dressed decently. But that was his fault. He controlled the money and hardly contributed to our living expenses. I couldn't work due to caring for his mother. I had pleaded with him multiple times to contribute more to the household or to spend more time at home with us. I tried my best to maintain family relationships. But after 10 years of our marriage, I finally got to the point where I said to myself, enough is enough. I had been tolerating him for 2 reasons. The first reason was my mother-in-law. She was genuinely a good person, and I felt sorry for her. I couldn't just abandon her. She would have been sent to a nursing home, receiving inadequate care and dying alone. Hey, aren't you the one who was having an affair? The second reason. I knew James was cheating on me but ignored it, focusing on caring for my mother-in-law as part of my revenge on him. I had no intention of forgiving him for what he had done. "Oh. You knew. That makes things easier." He continued shamelessly, "I am sure you were cheating on me too. We haven't made love for 10 years anyway. I have a mistress and a child. Raising kids are expensive nowadays, so we both agree that there will be no alimony, don't we? I'll be moving them here, so I want you to leave by the end of the week." He seemed pleased, as if everything was settled. "Wait a minute. Don't decide everything on your own. I want to talk things over with my lawyer." "What?" "That will be too much of a hassle. We just need to get separated for a certain period of time and get divorced." "No. First of all, I've never cheated on you. It was just a misunderstanding." "What?" "But I saw you with a young man last night. You can't deny that. That young man was my lawyer, Michael. Your mother left a will." For the first time, James seemed genuinely shocked. And that gave me a sense of satisfaction. But this was just the beginning. I was going to make him go through hell. "A will? What are you talking about? I am the sole beneficiary of my mother's will, right? I'm her only son." James was counting on his mother's inheritance. Well, naturally, he would be the one to inherit it. From what my mother-in-law told me, her husband died in a car accident many years ago. Since it wasn't his fault, a substantial amount of insurance money was paid out. The beneficiary was my mother-in-law, of course, but she had given half of it to James. However, when he received it, he smirked unpleasantly and said, "Wow, you get a lot of money when someone dies?" She told me that she was horrified when she heard that. Ever since my mother-in-law's health deteriorated, my husband would ask me, "Do you know how much money my mom has?" His intention was to do nothing but to inherit everything his mother had. Who knows? I've never seen any of her bank account details other than the one she uses regularly. I played dumb, but he insisted there must still be some money left from Dad's inheritance. Mom hardly spent any of it. In reality, a lot of it had been spent on the surgery my mother-in-law had to have when she had a stroke, on her long-term hospital stays afterwards, and on our living expenses, but my husband conveniently forgot all that. Anyway, I've arranged a meeting with Michael for this Saturday. We need to talk about our divorce too. Just make sure you will meet us at his office on Saturday. I had been deceived by James for all those years. We met at a singles party, and I thought we had a romantic relationship before we got married. But in reality, he was just looking for someone who would look after him and his mother and do all the housework for free. 6 months before we met, his mother had a stroke. She survived but was left paralyzed on her left side and bedridden. After a long hospital stay and rehabilitation, she was finally discharged from the hospital, but she needed a continuous care. Her husband was already deceased, and James was an only child. They had no other family to rely on. And the waiting list for nursing homes was too long. He couldn't look after her during the daytime because of his job, and hiring professional caregivers was expensive. Still, they initially hired someone to help. But what he didn't know was that the caregiver would only look after his paralyzed mother and prepare meals for her, but not for him. That was when he first thought about finding himself a wife. So, he didn't love me, he just wanted someone suitable to his needs. And I was too blind to see that. I was not pretty, nor was I attractive. So, when James asked me out at the singles party, I was over the moon. When he asked me to be a full-time housewife and to take care of his mother, I was disappointed to know his real intention of marrying me. Luckily for me, his mother was such a wonderful person. We became close friends despite our age difference, so caring for her wasn't too hard for me. I never regretted quitting my job to take care of her. The only thing I couldn't stand was his behavior. After we were married, he completely stopped caring about us. He acted like a single man, going out for drinks with his friends, flirting with women. He would say, "Sorry, I won't be able to come home as often as I should. My job requires for me to travel a lot for work." But that turned out to be a complete lie. By then, he had a mistress and started spending most of his time at her place. My mother-in-law always hoped that, one day, her son would change and that we could live happily as a family, but unfortunately, that never happened. Eventually, she and I both gave up. Then came Saturday. "I'm Michael. Pleased to meet you." The young lawyer, whom James thought was my lover, greeted him professionally. James started, "You're still technically my wife, you know. So you can't inherit what is rightfully mine." I asked him, "Ever heard of a special contribution?" "Special what?" "Special contribution. If I hadn't taken care of your mom, you would have had to hire caregivers. I saved you from those expenses. I'll be asking you for that money." I was not a volunteer caregiver. How much are we talking about here? James must have been feeling guilty for not being around for me and his mother for all those years. He asked about the price. "It comes to about $300,000. "What? That's way too high. You've got to be kidding." His eyes widened in shock. Michael, my lawyer, interjected, "Actually, that's a very conservative estimate. For the past 10 years, I had meticulously kept a daily caregiving journal and records of the purchases that I made for his mother. I spent at least 3 hours every day on caregiving of your mother. The going rate for such services is about $80 a day, so for 365 days a year over 10 years, that's how much it adds up to." I took a calculator out of my bag, quickly calculated in front of James, and showed him the result. However, in reality, I could only ask about 70% of that amount, which was around $200,000. But there was no need to mention it to him. You're kidding me. James, who thought of me as a volunteer housekeeper, was clearly taken aback by this unexpected expense. He was absolutely dumbfounded for a short while. Wait a minute. You mentioned a will. I want to see that now, he urged. Here is the will of the deceased, your mother, said Michael. As he took a white envelope out of his bag, James snatched it from his hand. Hey! What are you doing? Before I could stop him, he tore open the envelope. Stop it. I tried to take the will from him, but he turned his back to me and started reading it. What on earth is this? Everything has been left to you? He was furious, thrusting the will at me. This is a joke. You have to renounce the inheritance. He shouted and then said, "Oh, you know what I can do? Stop it, please." He tore the will into small pieces and threw them out the window. How dare you? As I stood in shock, he smirked, now there's no will. You will get nothing. You are. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe how stupid he was. He did exactly what my mother-in-law and I had predicted him to do. You're really naive. I laughed softly. What? He looked puzzled, but it was too late. Nothing. Michael, please proceed. I gave Michael a nod to take over. Michael nodded and started. About the will you just tore up. What? There's no more will. James tried to intimidate Michael, who looked young and inexperienced. Well, I definitely had it in my hand. And now you've destroyed it and are threatening me and my client. I can get you arrested for that. Michael was a very good lawyer. He didn't even flinch. What are you talking about? The will needs to be verified in probate court, so we were just going to show it to you today. But now that you've intentionally destroyed it, it constitutes a reason for disqualification from inheritance. You've just lost your right to inherit. When Michael calmly explained that, James suddenly became anxious. What's with this disqualification thing? You're lying. Children are supposed to inherit regardless of what the will says, he blurted out with his half-baked knowledge. That would be the reserved portion. However, if you're disqualified from inheriting, you can't receive any part of the estate, Michael clarified. So that's it. My husband turned pale, but it was his own fault for tearing up the will. What a silly man. Also, you mentioned getting a divorce. As per my client's request, we will be filing for division of property. What? You just tried to swindle me out of a huge amount with that contribution thing. That's a separate matter. Oh, just so you know, this is all being recorded, including the part when you tore up the will and threatened us. So please don't be silly. I loved the idea of taking as much money as I could from him. This was my revenge. I just wanted him to suffer and to leave him penniless. Damn it. You are such a horrible woman. Taking all my money like this? My husband fumed, but I just sighed. Look, your mother was always worried about you. No matter what, she loved you unconditionally. But, you had been such a jerk to your mother that I feel sorry for her. She was neglected and left in my care while her son went off having affairs. She apologized to me many times for her son's behavior. I even saw her crying alone and asking herself over and over, was there something wrong with the way I raised him? My mother-in-law tried to admonish him for not coming home, but he never listened to her. After discussing with your mother, we agreed that you needed some harsh punishment, I told him. When it comes to the inheritance, a biological child usually has the advantage. So she had to leave a will to make sure James wouldn't inherit anything. She also gave me permission to thoroughly break his spirit. By the way, about the child of yours. Are you sure he's really yours? What? Of course, he's my child, he asserted. I just wondered. I saw a photo of the child, but he doesn't look anything like you. He takes after his mother. Okay. Let's just leave it at that, I chuckled. You sound like you know something. I know nothing. Of course, that was a lie. I hired a private investigator to gather all the information about his mistress. Among the photos he took was his mistress with another man, holding hand in hand. And the man on the photo looked exactly like the child. My husband was being deceived by his mistress. I'd say, what goes around comes around. Well, since we're getting divorced, there's no need for us to discuss anything further. From now on, please communicate through Michael. Don't contact me directly. As I spoke firmly, my husband fell silent. His face was ashen. He thought he would inherit a fortune, but that didn't happen. Not only that, he would have to pay me $300,000. Serves him right. This way, I was able to divorce him under favorable conditions. I had always managed my mother-in-law's estate, so it simply remained with me. As for James, his mistress dumped him soon after she found out he owed me a lot of money. I heard she was asking him for child support and that James still didn't know the kid was not his. As for me, I'm leading a busy but fulfilling life. I recently landed a full-time job and I am on a trial period at the moment. The person who has been training me at work is quite friendly and attentive. He also asked me out for lunch this weekend. He is a genuinely nice man, nothing like my ex-husband. I thought I was done with men, but somehow I feel this guy might be alright. Well, I'm going to take things slow and see how it goes.